Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to the Ephrata Community Church Weekly Podcast, a conversation with our pastors and leaders meant to continue encouraging you to know God, know freedom, know purpose, and make a difference.
Well, hey, welcome to the Ephrata Community Church Podcast. It is great to have you joining us today. Dan Gulnac here with Pastor Kevin Eshleman. We are glad to be here today, and we are taking a break this week from discussing our weekend services and sermons as we usually do, because we have a special topic today. Specifically, we just want to have a conversation about church planting.
Yep.
And Ephrata Community Church, our heart towards church planting, our history about it. You know, one of the things that I had mentioned to you was, I love the quote from C. Peter Wagner, who said that church planting is the most effective evangelistic method under heaven. Now, I don't know if he's right. That was his opinion. But I have a heart for planting new churches because I do believe it is a way for us to fulfill the Great Commission. And, you know, there's statistics out there that 60 to 80% new believers are reached by new church plants each year than established churches. Yep. You and I know we both want to see every established church reach lots of new people for Jesus each and every year. But it is an effective way to reach the lost and to reach new people. And so that's my heart for it. But we at Ephrata Community Church, I know we have a history of planting churches, and it's a heart here. So, you know, Kevin, what is our history first and foremost? And let's dive into this conversation.
Yeah. Well, the history, we would have a history of letting God do what He wants to do. I know it sounds easy. It's actually not oftentimes done. You know, Ephrata Community Church starting as a small church with 12 people, and sometimes what churches do is they decide what they want in a church, meaning that okay, we want to remain a small church. And you know, interestingly, God does have a certain amount of He honors that. Okay, if that's what you want, that's where it's going to go. Yeah. We've taken the approach here. We're going to adapt to what God is doing and what He's laying upon our heart here as well. So we did move from, you know, a house church of 12 people to the barn, to the next building, to this building, as well as launching several congregations in that process as well. So it really goes back to as far as 1990. A couple of very key things, but. There was a weekend retreat that the church did at that point in the church life. The whole church used to go away for an entire weekend. Would rent out a college campus, you know, dormitory in the middle of summertime and do some intensive teaching. And Barry Whistler would have taught on the Church of Antioch from Acts chapter 11 and 13 and really asked the church to embrace that model. Yeah. And so from that time, in early 1990s, there was actually even a prophetic word that said God would pour out His Spirit in the fourth year. So from 1990 to 1994. And so what began to happen from that point was they took the prophetic word seriously, so they embraced that. They began to think about, okay, well, we need to maybe expand the capacity of actually receiving people if God's going to pour out His Holy Spirit. So First Church, Covenant Community Church would have been planted about that time as well. In year number 4, God did pour out His Spirit in a way that we did not expect, which was a defining, when I say moment, it was about 3 to 4 years, defining moment of who we are as Ephrata Community Church. But even in that time would have been the seeds. I can't really say that HarvestNet was born then. To some degree, HarvestNet was born in that season, but it was maybe just not taking shape or form to the degree that it did like in the later 1990s as well. So that began with twofold, like we want to expand congregations, see more churches planted, as well as see healthy churches thrive. Right. Church congregations get healthy and thrive. About four times a year or so, we do a mailing here at Ephrata Community Church. We cover a 5-mile radius, so 10 miles all the way from side to side. Yep. Our estimation, based upon census figures and who lives in that area, that we could be mailing to 42,000 or so, 40,000, if we want to be conservative, okay, we'll say 35,000 unchurched folks. Wow. Within that kind of driving distance of Ephrata Community Church. So in this area, when you talk about church planting, people will say, don't we have enough? Aren't there enough? We need every congregation healthy and reaching people, and we need more. Right. To reach. I am grateful for obviously the area we live in and all that God has been doing and is doing here, and we have thriving congregations, but we're still not recognizing that there's actually more.
Yeah, and
that's needed.
And that makes me even think of the number that's represented by the map that you have in your office, which it's escaping me right now, the number.
Yeah, 226,000 people. That goes back, I'm trying to think, it's probably about a year, 14 months or so ago.
Okay.
We are praying for revival. That's, we're not apologizing for that, or we're not going to adjust for that. And I know that becomes almost a little bit of a catchword.
Yeah.
And it's hard to know, like, okay, how do you define what revival is? And I would simply say, who am I to define what revival is? But it is people regularly coming to the Lord, and Christians breaking out of lukewarm mediocrity and passionately live, like those two things.
Yeah.
So whether it's a loud revival or whether it's a quiet revival, like that's all form.
Yep.
The fruit is people being born again. And so we do believe for that, and we expect that. And so while we do live in a great area and great things are happening, we have to continue to build the wineskins required to hold.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know your heart's the same as mine, which is, I'm willing to do anything short of sin.
Yeah, right.
Right? To reach all of those 200,000 plus people with the gospel.
Yeah.
And to see believers revived, to live thriving lives, walking in the Spirit, whatever it takes. And so there are some there are some new wineskins even that we're pursuing right now. One of them is disciple making movements, and so maybe some of you haven't heard about that or don't even know what that word means. So what do we mean when we say that, Kevin?
Before I answer that question, if I could just step back to the 226,000.
You can do whatever you want.
Well, I don't know about that. But I felt 14 months ago, I felt like the Lord was asking me to believe for actually a certain number of salvations to occur.
Okay.
And so looking at some revival times, seasons of revival from both the 70s and going back, into previous centuries as well. It's just kind of a rough number of, hey, about 20% of the population gave their life to the Lord. And so I simply looked up the population of Berks, Lebanon, and Lancaster County, and 20% of that is 226,000. I was going to be gracious and ask God for 230. But I felt like I felt like the God was asking me to actually carry a very specific number.
Wow.
To say, okay, we want revival. Okay, that's good. We'll do it, but I'm asking for 230,000 salvations in that 3-county region.
Right. 250,000 people in 3 counties. And the other thing that we see with revival historically is the transformation within the communities and within culture that comes with that as well. So it of course is individuals that are coming to salvation, families that are transformed, but we also see cultural transformation as well. And so and that's 250,000 people in 3 counties, and especially with the population density of our counties, is a lot of people, and
it is.
And what an impact it could have.
Yeah. By the way, just kind of a side note. So if 230,000 people did give their lives to the Lord, we would still be less than 50% churched in those 3 counties.
Yeah.
So when I look at that, I thought maybe I'm not asking God for enough, but we'll start there.
No, that's good, man. That just that breaks my heart. And that's definitely something. I would invite anyone listening and or watching to pray with us for. Yeah, for sure.
So disciple making movement.
Yeah.
One great thing there's so many great things about the season in which we live, but one of those things right now is there's a significant amount of congregational unity. So between various expressions of the body of Christ. So it isn't just congregations that are like one another. But actually congregations that are different from one another, that work together and like one another, and with that same heart, we got to reach people for Jesus. So I can mention various congregations, but in other words, we talk together about strategy, about how can we reach people, and so there's.
And you mean you and other churches?
Other leaders, yes.
Other leaders, yeah.
And so part of it is like, we know some that use a satellite campus expansion model, autonomous church plant expansion model, and all of that like all of them are valid, and we actually want to be a part of all of those. So it's not like we're doing one to the exclusion of the other. But we have been somewhat captured by the disciple-making movement, which is really how the church is growing in most of the world.
Yeah.
Except here. However, I think there's a segment of the population that will respond to that and even not other models.
Right. Yeah, me too. Me too. On Sunday even, or last Sunday, you mentioned about Iran.
Yeah.
And, the way that the underground church is growing in Iran and led majority by women. But even there, that disciple-making movements is what is attributing to that growth.
Yes.
And it's attributing to the growth in India. It's attributing to the growth in China.
Yeah.
Numerics tell us that this movement, disciple-making movements, actually we are seeing in places that the church is persecuted the most, the fastest growth of the church since Pentecost.
Yeah.
That's
amazing. Since Pentecost.
Right? And so, so for us, I mean, this is something we want to pay. We want to pay attention to and say, okay, God, what are you doing? And if you're doing this, how can we join you? And what about here?
Yeah.
And so the disciple-making movements, is this idea of engaging people where they are and discipling them where they are and inviting them to become part of a shared community.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's in homes, that could be in third spaces and coffee shops or whatever that is. And discipling people that are far from Jesus to come and encounter Jesus, surrender to Him as Lord, and become a faith community wherever they're at. And I hesitate, even as this conversation, to name what that is, because we, as soon as we put words
labels
to it, we labels to it, people
it.
have a frame for what that is, but essentially they become small churches.
Yeah.
So one of the terms for the outcome of disciple-making movements is micro-churches. That seems to be used quite often around the conversation right now.
Yeah.
But smaller expressions of the church that could be multiplying movements of disciple-making. I don't know what else you wanted to share on that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, even going back to our own history, like I mentioned, we started with 12 people. So even if, like, using the term of house church, micro church, we should call it Jesus Church. In other words, Jesus, it's your church, you do with it as you see fit.
Right.
So the leaders of Effort Community Church, this church belongs to you, Jesus, and so you do with it what you want. You want to use us for revival and renewal, and like in the 1990s, you want us to move from a house to a barn to a building number 1 and building number 2. It's not our church, it's His. So but starting different. So in this particular case with disciple-making movement, it's the priority then is making disciples.
Yeah.
Now other models work well, where you invite someone to church, they give their life to Jesus, and then you make. But this is actually leading by disciple-making and then seeing what God forms out of that as well.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, I want to be careful for those of you listening or watching, not to do like an us versus them or this versus that. Like, we need every model. We need every model healthy. But there is a difference in approach from, traditional church planting. What you do is you start with a Sunday gathering.
Yeah.
And you invite people to that. And we're all very familiar with this, where this actually starts with what may be a one-to-one relationship with someone who's far from Jesus, and building a relationship with them and inviting a group of people to begin to discover who Jesus is through His Word. And as that group discovers who Jesus is, and becomes a group of followers of Jesus meeting together, well, then the natural outcome is you have a church.
You got a church going on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things you mentioned there was, I'm trying to think how you said it just a few minutes ago, but it's about discipling people where they are.
Yeah.
And another way of saying maybe the same thing is it's discipling people where you are.
Correct.
So it's a way of actually looking like where's God placed me? Who's the people that are around me? I'm a part of a gym, or I go to this school, or I'm at XYZ community college, or whatever that is. So it's as much where He sent us. And so it's a matter of like opening our eyes, taking a look around, and seeing what's actually right in front of us.
Yeah. I like to use the phrase where we live, where we learn, where we work, and where we play.
Yeah.
So, your neighborhood, where you learn. If you're a college student, if you're a high school student, if you're even an adult learner,
Yep.
if you're learning someplace that God's placed you there, not only to gain a degree or whatever, but also to be a missionary.
Yep.
Where you work, our workplaces are great places, and we encounter people all the time at our workplaces. And if you go in there as a missionary, that changes with a missionary mindset, that changes the way that you engage people. That may change what you do on your breaks, where you eat lunch, how you eat lunch, right?
Yep.
Where you play, like you said, recreation.
Yeah.
I go to the gym every morning. Okay, well, that's great. Physical fitness, big fan.
Yep.
But also, who's there?
What soccer team do you play on? What
Yeah.
rugby team do you play on? Softball,
Yep.
you name it.
Yeah, and if you're a parent and you have kids in sports and
Yeah.
you're spending, hours a week sitting there with other parents watching your kids engage, what a perfect
opportunity, yeah.
example,
Yeah.
an opportunity to reach people for Jesus. So one of the things we're doing here is we're moving towards doing this, and I'm moving towards training people
Yeah.
on how to do this. And I don't know how much you wanted to say about that, or inform people about that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's just one of those areas where we feel called to steward. And this conversation would be about 3 to almost 4 years old. Right. But actually, we did not have the focused resources actually to pour into that. And that's a big part of what you're doing is to say, okay, we want to move this in a direction. And so folks have been through some training with that as well. But this is not really a flash in the pan kind of thing. It's a gradual build that builds momentum, and I believe that we'll see that occur.
Yeah, and so for those of you that are joining us, whenever you are, just know, we have started going after this and training and equipping people, and it's something you're going to hear more about.
Yep.
And there's going to be opportunities for people that are part of Effort Community Church to grow in their capacity to engage in this and to explore what it may be for them. Maybe God's inviting them to be part of this new wineskin.
Yep.
And I'm really excited about it, obviously.
I am as well. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah. And so, we wanted to have a small conversation about this. This is just a drop in the pan compared to all that we could talk about this. We could quite honestly spend hours discussing this, but we wanted to start the conversation with those that haven't heard it yet, because you're going to be hearing more, and also to have you start praying with us, and for even those that have already been trained and are actively pursuing this disciple-making movements in our region. There are people in our church, and you'll learn more about them soon as well. But thank you for joining us today and for tuning in. We appreciate your prayers around this and your engagement in this, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Hey, thanks again for joining us today. We hope that you've been encouraged by listening. You can listen to previous episodes, find additional resources, and of course, learn more about us at effortacommunitychurch.com.